Okay, everybody, we have come to a critical point in the semester here. We are going to be working on your final project. A couple of notes on the final project. First of all, it's worth 25% or a quarter of your final grade. So this is a huge percentage of what you are going to be graded on in this class for the final grade. So you need to spend some time working on it, and you need to make sure that everything that you turn in for this assignment is done with the demonstration of mastery of what you have learned throughout the semester in this class. I also want to point out that, for our previous assignments, the grading has been pretty liberal, I guess, because I feel that when you're learning these techniques, I want you to be creative and I want you to take risks, and I want you, to really stretch your boundaries. But when it comes to the final here, I am going to be very, very critical in the sense of technical flaws, things that are out of focus that should be in focus, exposure issues, stuff like that. All of those will count heavily towards your grade. So make sure whatever you're doing is correctly exposed, properly focused. Certainly we recognize that if something has an intentional blur, that's okay, but otherwise the images should be adequately sharp. The appropriate use of ISO in your images and shutter setting. And then finally, we really want to make sure that the images that you present are not images that if just the average Joe walking down the street went ahead and went to that scene would be able to point a camera and come away with the same stuff. So those are things that we are going to be looking for in that final project. So with that being said, let's start out here talking about PJ's work. So before I get too far into it with this, again, just a reminder, please, please, please don't embed your images in PDFs. They're not very helpful to us when we begin critiquing stuff. So for the final project, I absolutely will not accept anything embedded in a PDF here. So anyhow, PJ wants to do a project on his high school football field that he said he spent loads of time practicing on and getting up early for, and then eventually this field was remodeled and rebuilt, so he chose to focus in on some different aspects of it. So first and foremost, I think you have a very good sense of composition and where to place things in your frame. I really love how we've got this nice diagonal line that leads to the really brightly colored press box there. I love how sort of this water tower that you talk about it being this imposing figure over the field. I love how you've actually gone ahead and filled the frame and really made it an imposing part of this frame here. I love how you've isolated the light posts and used negative space. And I sort of love the balance and symmetry that's going on in this football field image. All of those things are great, and your personal connection to the project, I think, is really, really fantastic. So from that perspective, I want you to keep moving in that direction. Now, on the other hand, there definitely are some things here that I think you can refine and improve upon to get this portfolio up into the A range. So first of all, on this image, really bad blowouts in the sky here, which on some level I guess I can kind of live with because stylistically I think it's kind of interesting. But if we zoom in here also a little bit, there's all kinds of imager spots in the sky, which are essentially little dust spots that fall on the imager and end up recording as black spots, especially in skies. So in, I think it's module 4 or 5, there's a tutorial on dealing with those in your images. The other thing here, you talk about being at the football field at 6:30 in the morning. I really would love to see some shots at the football field at 6:30 in the morning. I think the light would be beautiful. I think the shadows that you would get from this light tower, and even the light posts and stuff like that, the sky, all those things would be pretty spectacular. I would say here in this group of images, the lighting's pretty flat, pretty boring, and quite honestly, nothing special about it. I particularly would point to this image of the scoreboard, which makes me look at it and say, okay, well, great, next thing, because there's really nothing interesting going on here. There's no interesting lighting. The sky's kind of gray and bleak and dreary. The shape itself is pretty uninteresting, and so as you go in and develop this project and make more images for it, certainly I love what you're doing here in these three images. Love the use of shape and form and geometry and composition, but definitely I think different lighting needs to come into play here, and also be very careful, especially when we're showing lots of skies, to not have all these little dust spots and imager spots. It really does make a huge difference. And quite honestly here, here's the reason why we're embedded in a document like this, and geez, we don't see those dust spots. But you hang that photo up on a gallery wall, I guarantee you those dust spots are going to be pretty prevalent. And quite honestly, there's also lots of noise in the sky here too. This kind of mottled graininess. So be careful on both those counts. But I think you're definitely headed in the right direction. This is a really good solid start. So just get out there and get one more shoot in there and try and do it when the light is interesting. And if you can't get out there at 6:30 in the morning, maybe try 8:30 at night. Again, trying to just get it when there's really some interesting lighting going on. Okay. So look forward to seeing what you have for us in the finished product. So next up we have Adalberto's images, and this project is going to be focused in on the idea of hype, particularly as it relates to fashion and merchandising. So the thing that really catches my eye in all of your images is the way that you use the color red here. And I think it really is a wonderful cohesive element that ties all of these images together here. So we've got the little logo on the pen or the marker that says Supreme on it, which kind of not only catches our attention by the color, but also says something about it in the words that are there. We've got the sneakers that have the really bright, punchy red color on the heels and on the ankle area. Although I got to be honest with you, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe seeing this image a little bit on the brighter side. Maybe something like this. And our eyes typically go to the brightest spot of the photograph. And even when we close this down like this, back to the original, this is our brightest spot right here. And the area of interest for us is right here. So as you're lighting these things, I think you want to be aware of that reflection or that burst of light, and make sure that wherever you're putting it, the center of interest is in that same spot, which I think is kind of a disconnect in this image. So I might go back and rethink the shoot on that one. And then this last one, I think the thing that, again, I really love about this last one here is that we have that rule of thirds where we put a subject sort of up in one of the corners of the image here. And I really love how the image of this woman is staring right back at the viewer. And it's just, we're constantly just being hammered with Supreme, 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 Supreme here, and then we're also confronted with that gaze, sort of, almost like a mindless gaze that's going on there that I think is really, really wonderful. I guess the only thing that, again, in this image that I might think about refining is what you've used in the background here. I know it's kind of a nitpicky thing, but the fabric is kind of wrinkled in the background, and I think this image, if you went in and just iron or steam this out, I think it just would look that much slicker, and again, kind of, mirror the slickness that's going on with these advertising campaigns and so forth. So think about that. You want to match what's going on in the images in your own image here, and I don't think we'd ever see a model in one of these ad campaigns wearing wrinkled clothing. So that might just be the one little detail that I want to fix there. But anyhow, I think I like your project a lot. I think it's a great conceptual project. I like the way you're using color in these images, and even the way you're using light. Although, again, remember, whatever you highlight in your photograph, make sure that's the part that the viewer's eye should go to in the photograph. So look forward to seeing the final project in a couple days. Thanks. Okay, next up we have Zoe's images. And Zoe's working on a project that documents her life in Germany and as an au pair. So we'll just peruse her images really quickly here a second. I'll give you a feel for that. And again, I just ask everybody, please don't embed your images for the final project. As you can kind of see here during this feedback session, that it is kind of a pain to go back and forth through the PDF document to really examine and look at the images. So just for the final, make sure that you are mindful of that. So Zoe, start out, towards the end of your paper here, you mentioned that you think portraits are the most meaningful kind of photography for you. And quite honestly, I've got to 100% agree with you in that point. As a photographer, I'm most drawn to people photography. I think, every person and every individual is different. And in that sense, it immediately allows us the opportunity to take unique photographs. Whereas if we're shooting buildings or landscapes or stuff like that, it almost feels like these are always places that people have visited before and photographed before. So I really like that idea. And this first image, I think, is stunning. Absolutely stunning. I love the expression on the little girl's face. I love the gesture with the hands. And I think as importantly here is this wonderful kind of tunnel of light that is coming through and just falling partially on her face and really illuminating it. So we've kind of talked about one of the compositional elements is using frames, and certainly you've got a wonderful framing technique going on there. We've got this great lighting happening in the photograph, and I also love these little extra details that you've kind of included that the viewer probably doesn't notice right away, but the more you become engrossed in the photograph, I think the more you wonder what they mean and how they're related to the child, if they're related at all. And I think they give some flavor as to the location or the scene or where this is taking place. So all of this is great, and I think if you continue along this direction, I think you're going to be in really good shape. So you've got a building shot here, and great color in the sky. Buildings have unique and interesting shapes. I love the dramatic shadow that's going along there. But here's the deal. For the final project, we're looking for a series of images that are cohesive. And when I say cohesive, I mean not only cohesive in where they're taken and the location. So, for example, all these images are taken in Germany. But I want them to be cohesive in the sense that we want to use the same type of lighting, similar type of style of photograph. And I feel like these two images, if we were to just put them out on a gallery wall, we'd almost think that two completely different photographers shot these. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with this image, I do think it's a pretty image. I just think this is so much more strong, so much more interesting, and I think you need to do more images like this, whether it's just more shots of Anna here or just more people shots through your journeys through Germany. Similarly, again, I love this shot. I love the mirroring of forms, both of the subjects in the photograph looking outside. It kind of, forces the viewer to also look outside of that window and really wonder for a moment what's going on out there. Why are they looking out there? What's the point of the attention being pointed there? All of that stuff. I think that's really interesting. I think it's fascinating. And I even love the way the light, again, is kind of falling on these two faces here. So at the end of the day here, I guess all of your images are really great. But, I think when we're talking about a cohesive body of work, and also given the fact that you really do love portraits, I think you can really come up with a group of images that can be really, really special if you just focus in on stuff like this and kind of avoid the building shots. Because I just, there's nothing wrong with them, but I just think from a cohesive point of view and also from an interest point of view, they're probably not fitting into what you're doing with some of those other portraits. Okay, so good luck with that, and obviously if you have any questions, certainly shoot a note, and we can toss that about a little bit more. And then next we have Brianna's images. So Brianna is going to do a project where she basically is documenting real estate throughout the city of Buffalo. Talks about having a passion for homes and design and so forth. So she's going to try and take a bunch of images that document the different styles that we have in the city. And one of the important things, I think, from her proposal that I read was that she's looking to do it in a way that would sort of advertise or sell these homes the way you'd see in sort of the real estate section in the newspaper. So we'll just do a quick bounce between the three shots here. Okay, so for your first shot, really, really love this beautiful lighting that's going on in the images. We've got these wonderful shadows that are revealing the textures in the houses. I love how the houses are very perfectly vertical, so they're straight up and down. We get a good sense of the way the house looks in its surrounding neighborhood. The focus is really sharp in this image. All those things I really like. The thing that is kind of a disconnect with what was said in your proposal here is you've kind of got all this superfluous stuff going on in the image. You've got the car that's sort of blocking the house, this sign that is just kind of hanging there. We really can't even see what the sign says, and then we've got this other sign in the background, which quite honestly might be the thing that for a moment or two here my mind is probably focused in on, because it's yellow and it has writing on it. So when we have writing in photographs, and especially when we have hot colors or colors that really catch your eye like red or yellow, the eye is going to go to that. So I kind of feel like, what we should be looking at in this image is maybe this shot, but what I'm really going to is this, and then you've got all this other junk in the photograph. So, if you're going to show this image like an image from real estate, you got to kind of edit your frame a little bit more scrupulously or thoroughly. Let me take a look. We'll just call up an advertisement for a home. So just go to, like Howard Hanna real estate here. What do we got in Buffalo? So I'm just kind of going through these and doing different stuff, but I think this is a good example right here. We've got a straight on image that concentrates on the house and the specific details that we're looking for within it. It crops out other stuff, and certainly we don't see like things like garbage cans and street signs and other stuff like that. So if that is your intention to come up with that, I think you really gotta do a little bit of research, take a look at what these house photos look like in the real estate sites, and go from there. Now, I do, again, really love the light you're shooting these in. I think from that perspective, going out and shooting at the same time with this kind of light could be really interesting. And quite honestly, I think, if we were to get rid of all this extraneous detail and just focus in on this, I mean, that's a way better shot, I think, than that shot in the real estate site. So it's really just going to come down to a matter of really trying to refine your frames a little bit better, and just clean up and isolate the house. Okay, so this image, just kind of feels like a grab shot, walking through the quad, and here's the chapel, and I'll point my camera upwards and take a photograph of it. Sky's not very interesting here. Potentially could be very interesting if we went in and, did a little bit of work to improve it. I'm just doing this kind of super fast. Bear with me here a little bit. And recognize here that I'm doing this super fast. You could do this a little bit slower, and then you start to, when you bring some of that detail out in the sky, and actually I probably even would make the chapel here a little bit lighter. Again, I'm kind of just going really fast and I'm going over the edges here, but if you're really diligent about getting the edges here selected correctly, and just make the adjustments in the area, then I think the photograph becomes that much more interesting. The chapel here is also leaning backwards, which is definitely a faux pas in architectural photography. One of the things we can do here is we can actually straighten that up in Photoshop by going to lens correction. And in lens correction, go to custom, and then what is happening is it's tilting. So if we just take the vertical perspective and switch it a little bit, now we can get the chapel so that it's actually straight up and not leaning backwards in kind of an awkward way. So again, I know, I did the sky here really quickly, but I think the idea here is get the detail, get the drama in the sky, and then open up the facade of the building and allow the viewer to see the details in the brick and so forth here. So that's the way to go. I'm not necessarily sure this would be a good example of a real estate photo, but if you're doing architecture, this is one thing you got to pay attention. Your buildings really shouldn't be tilting backwards like that originally was. So that is the technique how to straighten that up. And then last but not least here, Brianna, I'm gonna slap you on the wrist here. Um, it's you know we're at the point in the semester where the basic skill of getting an image in focus should be mastered, and we look at this image, this is totally out of focus here. So whether this was a matter of whether your autofocus didn't lock onto the background, maybe you just weren't patient, and kind of taking that deep breath and sort of relax and let the focus lock in before you press the shutter. Whatever the case is here, you really cannot submit out of focus photos for your final project. Something like this certainly would bring your overall score down in a very, very significant way. So please, please, please make sure that whatever you do submit for the final project is only your very, very best work here. Just looking through your sky here, making sure you don't have any little imager spots or anything like that in there. So again, I hate to be critical on stuff, but at this point, really, the focus in your image is absolutely one of the first and foremost things that I'm going to look at. And if your images aren't properly focused, then there's certainly going to be a huge markdown. So anyhow, look forward to seeing your images. I think that, again, you've got a good idea here, and I think lots of interesting architectural locations to work with in and around Canisius. So I don't think you're gonna want for good subject matter. It's really just a matter of finding really, really good lighting, cleaning up your frames or simplifying your frames, and then making sure from a technical perspective everything is where it should be. And if that's the case, I think you'll be in good shape for your final project. And last, but certainly not least, we have Kenny's images. And Kenny's going to do photographs of New York City for us, and he gave me some samples here in your document, and then we've also got some that you uploaded separately. So in looking at these images, so first of all, Kenny, before I forget, the date timestamp, please, please, please remove that. I can't recall ever being in a gallery or looking at a newspaper or a magazine and seeing photos with timestamps on them. So it's as simple as going into your menu and turning off the date time stamp on that. So on your camera, go to the menu, go to date time, and there should be a spot in there that you can check it off or turn it off, because we definitely do not want to display that. So what's interesting here is, you got a bunch of images that focus in on the architecture, and I think, from many perspectives, this really busy, lots of shape, lots of form, lots of repetition of pattern, I think is very, very visually pleasing, and especially I think is something that you're going to see in New York City that we probably wouldn't see in most other places in the world, simply because of the high density of population. So I love this idea, and I think you've got a lot of subject matter to work with on this even doing something like this. I mean, look, when we zoom in and simplify the frame, how interesting those shapes and patterns, and even like the little air conditioners that are hanging out in all the windows, how wonderful that is. I mean, I think that's great, and I also think it's very much in very many ways distinctive of New York City. And similarly, we've got another building here too. I think, zoom in, tighten up, focus in on shape and pattern and stuff like that, and you got yourself a really good project on your hands. On the other hand, I'm not really sure where the flowers come in. I mean, recognize that flowers are pretty much everywhere, and while they certainly are things that beautify New York and are present in New York, I feel like you could find this shot in any city in the world, whether that's some small town in the middle of Nebraska or in the biggest cities in the world here. So I think that from a conceptual point of view, having the flowers just doesn't really work for me, and it's not really cohesive. And quite honestly, it's a cliche. We see flowers everywhere, all the time, every day, as sort of evidence or documents of beauty. So, gosh, I'd love to see you avoid that if you could. And then finally, this sunset photograph. Again, I think, you got some pretty interesting stuff going on here. My question for you just is this something that is distinctly New York City? And if so, is it something that you can come up with a group of other images that we can fit together that are going to be a cohesive set of things? Because what we're looking for here is a bunch of images that look like stylistically they were shot by the same photographer. So we want them all to look kind of very, very similar in style, technique, aesthetics, so forth. This image, and any one of these images all look like they could have been shot by different photographers. So you gotta hone in on what your style is, what your interest is, and for my 2 cents, I love the architecture and the patterns of all of these, high density apartment housing units that seem to be all over New York City. So take that for what it's worth. You certainly aren't required to go in that direction, but I think looking at your images, this might be your best bet. So give it a shot, and certainly if you want to go a different direction, that's okay. But if you want to run something by me, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll take a look at it and give you some more comments. So everybody, that will do it here for our final review. Make sure that you do take your exam by Friday at 11:59 p.m. And then also make sure you get this portfolio in. Same way, Friday, 11:59 p.m. Unfortunately, there are no late submissions on this because we do have a pretty tight window that we have to have grades submitted by for. So with that being said, wish everyone good luck and look forward to seeing your final work. Thanks.